In my sketches, I'm not too particular on paper. Whatever paper I have, whether it's in a sketch pad, whether it's laser paper, whatever it is, I'm not really concerned, nor should you be, for what we're trying to do, which my sketches are for understanding. They are not going to a major museum. They're just for an understanding for me and a tool to improve my painting. So the top ones are compositional sketches, building through value, understanding shape relationship to see if I'll like the design before I invest a lot of time into a painting. And the bottom are used in a different way. This is understanding things, understanding trees and rocks and other things. They're used more for studying the anatomy of a tree or the anatomy of a rock. How do these shapes work? How do the planes work with each other? And really trying to study form. I know there's pencils shown in these sketches to give you size, but I believe all of these were done in Prismacolor. I do sketch in graphite or pencil, but I prefer Prismacolor, black or dark brown. The reason I like Prismacolor is the value range in it. You get very dark, and I like the feel of it on paper, but most of all, you can't erase it, and that's what I like about it. So when I'm laying these in, I know I'm not going backwards. I'm just going forwards, laying the marks down and committing to whatever it is. And that's a big part of it, because when you start painting, you have to start committing. You can't be constantly erasing or going backwards, or you're going to make a mess. That's kind of the beauty of digital, and maybe the curse as well, is you can go back, but maybe to the point of being able to do it too much. I don't know, it depends. So let's move on. Okay, time for my drawing demo. Rock, paper, scissors. The reason I'm calling it that is because I'm going to show you how I draw different things. As an artist, as a painter, as someone who creates anything, you don't want to be limited to say, oh, you know what, I just paint fish, I just paint trees, I only do this one environment with this one light source. You want to do it all, and the only way you can do it all is by learning and by trying everything. So I'm going to draw and show you how I draw, show you how I use rhythm and gesture and drawing with form, trying to lengthen my line. All the things I want to do, I'm going to do it with rocks, I'm going to do it with trees, and I'm going to do it with man-made objects, hence the name. This is how I start most of my days. I'll start sketching like this. I'll just take out some Prismacolor and paper or pen and paper. And whether I'm on location or in my studio looking at reference, I call these my art calisthenics. I can't come in, let's say I finished up a painting, or it was in the middle of a painting yesterday, it was like 5 feet by 6 feet, and the next I've slept and come in the morning and want to get into that painting. It's tough. It's tough to jump right into it. So what I will do is start the morning with drawing things like this. It wakes my mind up, and it gives me tons of notes and sketch pads full of things that give me ideas for future paintings. So it really helps me do two things. On this one, if you notice when I started, I did start with like a mitten form. I'm always thinking big shapes and then making those big shapes to small shapes. So as I drew this one, please notice that it was big shapes into smaller details. And same with this. As I get into this one, I'm going to put in the big form, the big gesture, and the big rhythm shapes to create something interesting before I put into the details. So once I put the details in, or once I put in the big shapes, I should say, then I start drawing with form. You may notice the different directional strokes, mark making that I'm creating. Those are all feeling, okay, where does this tree, planes, overall planes, not each plane of a leaf, but the overall tree, where do the planes face towards the light, which ones face towards the ground, and trying to show that in line. Okay, and one thing as you're drawing I would recommend, and as I'm doing this, is draw from your mind and your hand will follow. I have often said that I think parts of painting, it is harder to sign your name in cursive than it is to actually apply the paint, but it's all built on knowledge. So the more you understand a tree and planes of form, the greater understanding or greater product you will have when you're drawing. Is a lot of people think that it's a trick of the wrist or how coordinated your hand is. There certainly is that, but I think far more is your understanding on drawing. And that's what I'm trying to show here is how I develop a drawing and what I'm looking for. So what will help create form is the directional lines, directional mark making, and the quality, line quality. So if you notice in some areas, the lines that I'm creating are quite a bit darker, thicker than other areas. I tend to do that where there's weight or where there's maybe a shadow. And especially if you can kind of group those in an area, it will keep an area of focus. But no matter where you put that different line quality, it will create interest. That's part of the rhythm, is not only do you have the large rhythm of these trees and the form of what the trunks do and the gesture of what the foliage does, but there's also lines, the spacing of your mark making and the quality of line. All of that in the end will be rhythmical. And that's the goal. Even though at the start you may not feel like, your drawings are maybe as artistic as you would like, fight through it. Keep drawing those trees, keep drawing figures. My recommendation, draw everything in your house. Then there's never an excuse. I live somewhere it's cold or rainy or wherever. There's always something to draw. Draw your dog, your cat, your shoes, your silverware, draw the entire room, and you will see the improvement. So as I mentioned, we started with trees, and now I'm getting into rocks. And because rocks are made out of something different, they're much more solid than the trees, your drawing needs to reflect that. So you may see, as I draw this, I'm trying to show a solid form. My cross-hatching or directional strokes will go as if I'm feeling the rock. The tree was the same thing, but as I'm drawing, I'm not thinking one-dimensional paper. I'm ending up on a one-dimensional piece of paper, but I am thinking in three-dimension, and I think that really helps. Because if you think three-dimension as you're drawing, I think the way you will put down your strokes, as if you're walking across this cliff, or whether you're looking up at the tree, as if you're there on that paper, I think your directional strokes will help. Which direction does it go? Does it cut down? And it takes time. Sometimes your directional strokes you'll see, they'll kind of really destroy the form. But it just takes experience. As you can see, I am dealing with some light and shadow in all of these, but I'm far more concerned in form. Like a couple of those dark areas, that is a bit of a cast shadow to try to show a little bit of light. But I'm really more concerned with form. So another way, if you want to improve your drawing, is figure models. And the reason being is I can draw these rocks incorrectly or the tree incorrectly, but nobody knows because you don't know how big that rock was. But if you draw a figure, anyone who sees your figure drawing, including yourself, will be able to critique it well. So it's the best way to improve how you draw. Here, putting in these forms, as you can see, it's important to put not only big shapes and little shapes, but medium-sized shapes. An interesting drawing, every time I'm drawing, whether it's just a quick sketch of a mountain, a rock, a tree, I am thinking of that. It will give variety and interest by the size of the shape. I'm also thinking, once again, gesture. Even though these are rocks, what's the gesture of that rock? What's the rhythm of the group of rocks? And above all, with drawing, it is enjoyable. I know when you start, you think, oh man, and that's why a lot of people don't follow through with their drawing, because it is so hard at the start that they think, oh, I could never do that. But you can. I'll give you a great quote from one of my teachers. He's from New York, Bill Sanchez. One of the things he would say, and I'll try to do it in his New York accent, kid, you know what? Don't worry if you got talent. You don't worry, kid. You know why you don't worry? Because I've been doing this 40 years. 40 years I've been doing this. I don't know if I have talent. I just keep working. I hear him in my head all the time is, yeah, you know what? There is a thing called talent. I believe in it. I believe that some people are going to be more gifted at drawing, just like some people are going to be more gifted at math, and some people are going to be more gifted at public speaking and more gifted at you name it. Here's the problem. Worrying about talent is never going to get you where you want to be. Because if you worry about talent, it's going to be an excuse. It's going to be a reason, I just don't have the talent. You work your tail off, and then you get to find out how much you have. But I guarantee you have a lot more than you actually think you do. So I don't paint hardly anything that of the subject matter I'm about to paint, some rockets, some jets, a tractor. But I thought it was important, and the reason I thought it was important is showing how I draw something I'm really unfamiliar with, because I'm pretty familiar with rocks and trees, right? I'm a landscape painter for the most part, and even though I studied figure in school and very comfortable drawing figure, I thought it was good to say, okay, now here's some subject matter in case you're studying from me, but at the same time you're saying, well, that's great, John, but I'm not really interested in painting, the Sierras or the Pacific or the Andes. I'm really interested in painting, something maybe a little more gritty. Well, this is how I draw these forms. Same idea. I sketch out the main gesture and the big shapes, and then I look for the smaller shapes within it. And I'm building piece by piece in a fashion which I'm going to be talking about coming up pretty soon, in almost like, once you get the big pieces, almost like a puzzle pieces, putting the puzzle pieces together into smaller and smaller shapes until you really have something that you're comfortable with. And here's the hard part, is when do you know when to stop? You really don't. You can go smaller and smaller and smaller. For me, is when I get the big idea across, I'm done, because on these, which is so important, is these drawings are for me. When I draw, it is for understanding. I am trying to understand, how does this work? And I find no better way. You can stare at it all day long, but when you start drawing, you start really understanding, oh wow, okay, that fits into this. I don't know exactly what that mechanism does, but I believe this is some sort of shock absorber for this spaceship when it lands. Anyway, it's a great learning tool. Coming in with a little bit different line quality, as you can see, as I get a little more comfort with the shapes. I'm seeing that, okay, that's just a little consistent in the line quality. Okay, so here we're going to do a jet. And you may notice as I'm doing these, this is internet reference, the mechanical objects. The reason I kept the reference out, because I thought it was far more important to see how I build the shape. Eventually, when I get into painting, I'm going to show you my reference. But I felt here it was far more important to watch the drawing happen without the distraction of, oh, is he going to do that next? Is that the moment you're going to do next? So you will be able to see my reference, but on this, I just thought it was far more important to watch how this process happened. I didn't like the positioning of the air intake valve, and it just didn't feel right. And like I said, I don't like erasing, but it felt so off to me that I felt other things were not going to fall into place. So use your eraser judiciously. Sometimes you'll have to, but the more you can just keep going forward and do lots of drawings instead of lots of erasing. So an interesting thing with drawing is, why not just project? Why not just take a slide projector and project it up and paint it? For me, there's a few reasons. One is a camera distorts, even though these are from photo reference, so there's certainly going to be the distortion of the camera. But art, it comes from us, it comes from inside us. I think the combination of seeing, interpreting, going through my mind, my life experience, my level of learning, and coming out my hand in either paint or drawing puts my stamp of artistic opinion or feeling or thought into what I'm drawing or painting. And so if you just project it, because I think a lot of people think, well, why don't you just do that? Project the whole scene and just paint it. I think you lose so much. There is a staleness that comes out. And for someone who really paints a lot, who paints from life and draws from life, you can see it in people's art, and it just feels like it's missing something. It doesn't feel quite as alive. And so the reason I share that is, be a little more forgiving. I would gravitate always towards somebody who captured more the feeling and the moment of the place than to be technically perfect. There is something that's only in you, and it's going to come out in how you draw and paint. Embrace it. You still need to learn the fundamentals, and you still need to work hard to get there, but don't be discouraged, because there's something beautiful in what you bring to it.